Hey, this is Rich Wexler, and welcome to the Vintage Annals Archive podcast. I am so fucking stoked for today's episode. I had the honor of speaking with Paul Williams, composer, songwriter Hall of Fame, Grammy Award winner, wrote songs for the Carpenters, wrote many scores and songs for the Muppet Movie soundtrack. A lot of stuff. Very prolific. It was a dream come true of mine to get to talk to Paul. I had over the years I would comment here and there, and he would comment back, and I just thought he was really kind. And anyway, in a very lucky situation, I got to speak to Paul for about an hour. He is one of the smartest people I know. He very generous, and he really he's a part teacher and part sage. He really offers a lot of wisdom. There are things that we talked about. We recorded this in September that took me 4 or 5 more months to understand that he gave me all this knowledge that I didn't even, just because it keeps coming out, I wasn't even aware of it. And, you know, I can't wait to share this. This is really a very natural, a very just real conversation. And I was just so shocked at how gracious he was towards me and for doing this. I mean, Paul does not need my publicity help. He has his own. And what's impressive about Paul is he's never stopped doing really amazing things in the world. He, over the last 10 years, 15 years, he got more involved with doing recovery work, help for other people. He'll talk about his own recovery in this episode. He's been the president of ASCAP for a bunch of years. He's, when we had this interview, Paul woke up like an hour before I did. And I'm like, I don't know how you do this. Paul's a little older. Not much, a little. Anyway, I can't wait to share this. This is a very, very special episode, and honestly a dream come true to talk to a person that worked with Jim Henson, who is another hero, and really wrote words that I heard at 9 years old that changed my life. That movie, the messages, it changed my life forever. So to be able to talk to someone and then to have them be kind to you and thank you is a lot. Please enjoy. This is really a special episode. Thank you for listening and enjoy.
Just kind of like my podcast, Risk, in comparison to other storytelling shows, there is a level of raw honesty and intimate vulnerability in the stories shared on Risk. People have shared jaw-dropping stories about cannibalism or kidnapping or the kinkiest sort of kink stories, but also spiritual breakthroughs, beautiful stories about transcending trauma, near-death experiences, and even, just flat out hilarious, the most mortifying things that people have lived through. That's why Risk is such a favorite podcast of therapists and outdoor adventurers and activists and writers, because it's a show that is just so filled with life at its most. So that is why the Risk podcast and the Vintage Annals Archive podcast are so simpatico. Good friends. A lot in common. So seriously, do yourself a favor. Subscribe to both podcasts and spread the word.
Right before Paul's episode, we were playing an 8-minute radio piece that was a submission we got. We did a big Muppet event for Jim Henson's birthday last September, and we got this amazing piece by Tilly Lambs, which has such connection to Paul and Paul's work that I wanted to release this before his episode, and it's very special. We'll have contact for Tilly where you can find out about who they are and links for Paul's work, but please enjoy. This is a very special story, and it really relates a lot to what Paul talks about. So again, thank you.
I was a kid once, I don't have memories of being one, but I got pictures to prove it. I have stamps in my passports, which are long expired, from trips I took to visit distant relatives that I don't even remember. A trunk full of papers spanning my entire school career occupies a corner in my living room. I looked through it once, and it felt like reading letters from a stranger. I have rocks that I picked up and pocketed on hiking trails once upon a time, although I couldn't tell you where or when I got them or why I have them. I hate hiking. I always have. I think it's mostly due to my crippling fear of legless reptiles. I have boxes of sealed LPs from shows I don't remember going to, let alone enjoying. These things aren't important to me today, but I hang on to them just in case. Just in case someday I'll hit my head hard enough to remember why they were once significant in the first place. I often wonder what a stranger would think if they walked into my bedroom. Strange sculptures of body parts that double as tables, stacks of books on how to be happy, mixed in with sad poetry and punk scenes, unfinished art projects and essays. Band posters cover my walls. They're all framed, of course, because I like to think that's the adult thing to do. I've got my guitars, a neglected ukulele, pianos, an accordion I don't even know how to play. And then there's the Muppets. They're everywhere. Vintage mugs with the faces of Rolf, Miss Piggy, Statler, Waldorf, and some of my other friends are scattered on every possible surface, most of which holding multicolored markers that I put back in their respective homes even after they've dried up. Hand puppets and plush dolls, empty lunch boxes and trinket holders, Pez dispensers and prayer candles, paintings that friends have made me as gifts, books written by my friends Kermit the Frog and Pepe the King Prawn, a sealed board game that was made before I was even conceived as a thought, sheet music, cake molds. These are just the things I can see from where I'm sitting right now. Sometimes I imagine being on MTV's Room Raiders with a handsome stranger walking into my happy space and them trying to figure me out. They decide my room belongs to some sort of Encino Man character, or someone who maybe woke up from being in a coma since the early 2000s. They laugh, they pick the date with the hippie chick with the tie-dyed tapestry and likely live happily ever after. Sometimes I wonder if my room is the reason I'm alone. If any of the men I was once excited to bring home didn't call me back because they thought I was immature or weird. When I really think about it, I can't blame them for judging me, just as much as I judge someone who collects Star Trek figurines or sports memorabilia. Like most tangible items acquired before I grew up and metaphorically got my shit together, I'm not sure where or when I met the Muppets, but I do know that they are a big part of my life story and have been trudging along beside me on my journey from the moment that I decided I wanted to keep on living. My name is Tilly, and I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic. I used to think I was just a drug addict, but after an experiment gone wrong, I learned that I do not make the best decisions after I start drinking, drugs being one of them. In hindsight, had Beaker and Bunsen told me that I had a problem before I knew that I did, I think I would have laughed at those nerds. Today I'm fully aware that I'm not even close to being a scientist, so I leave stuff like that to the professionals. I got sober almost 4 years ago. My reasons for doing so were to save a shitty relationship that I ended up leaving, to save the friendships that I'm lucky enough to still have, and the thought of my dogs being sad if I just didn't wake up one day. I thought about how Rolf stopped talking for a while after Jim Henson died. That fucked me up for a while. Recovery is a weird thing, especially in an anonymous program that I will not name, but actively participate in. Everyone has their own horror stories, reasons for sticking around, and their own idea of what the word God means. I prefer the term higher power, because to me, calling my higher power God would be the same as referring to all amphibians as Kermit. When I was in the process of figuring out what I wanted from a perfect higher power that I had no reason to believe in, I listed a few key qualities which I wanted my concept of anything but some sort of sky daddy to embrace. It needed to be loving. It needed to teach me lessons. to inspire me creatively, to speak to me, to not just die on me one day, to be there when I needed some comfort, to have a sense of humor, and to help me be a better version of myself. You can probably see where this is going. Sometimes when I'm having a bad day, I'll flip through one of my Muppet books. Kermit usually has some seemingly simple metaphor about being a small frog in a big pond of dumb tadpoles, but it always hits me in such a profound and relatable way. Like he's reminding me that I matter, even when I feel small and insignificant. Miss Piggy may be a fashion icon and set an example of how confidence can get you anywhere, but to me, she shows me exactly what I don't want any potential future relationship to look like, no matter how in love I think I might be. Janice reminds me to be patient with myself, to not sweat the small stuff, because today won't be groovy if I waste it tripping out on tomorrow, because tomorrow isn't even real. I just need to be present, exist, and chill out, for sure. I don't cook, nor would I eat anything that my favorite chef from Sweden has ever attempted to make. Everything I know about flirting, I learned from Pepe, which is probably the reason why I'm single, okay? Fozzie taught me that even if I'm the only one laughing, my jokes are still funny. And Gonzo reminds me that even if sometimes I feel like I don't fit in, I still belong. These creatures are more than just faces on a t-shirt. They're more than their movies, their franchise, their music. They're my best friends. They're a power greater than me, much greater, and they've been here all along. I just wasn't looking hard enough. All of this is enough to get me through today, because that's all I've got. This moment. This moment's gone. Now it's a new one. I may not shout all of these thoughts from the rooftops, but I feel them in my heart, and it sure is nice to feel again. At the end of the day, it all comes down to acceptance. If the man in my dreams saw my room and walked out, I'd know he wasn't really the man in my dreams. Or if I had a heart-to-heart with someone about how Jim Henson's imagination and his goofy-looking felt creature saved my life, and I got a funny look, I would just move right along to the next moment. Jim Henson once said that when he was young, his ambition was to be one of the people who made a difference in this world, that his hope was to leave the world a little better for having been here. And that's exactly what he did. He did it for the lovers, he did it for the dreamers, and he did it for me.
I was born in 1970. I saw the Muppet. I grew up on Sesame Street, the Muppet Show, and when I saw the Muppet Movie, I was 9 in the theater, and that movie really changed my life. And I feel like because of your big part in that, you were part of that for me. There's a point during, I guess, Magic Store finale where it's after everything kind of crashes, and then you come back, and then Kermit just like kind of looks at the audience and says, "Life's like a movie where you're an ending." I feel like I took that for heart. Like I took that in my 9-year-old brain, and I feel like I made a decision to do that. And so I just want to thank you for, that part, because that really, in many ways, that movie changed my life and led me on a path of following, learning more about Jim. I found out that I had Jim's birthday when I was 21, and that made a lot of sense. And I just want to thank you for that, for your part in that. But I also want to ask you, in terms of that song, what were you going for that song?
Well, I think the philosophy that you responded to so positively and powerfully, which is the philosophy that I've basically lived my life by. I mean, as soon as I was old enough to consider it, the idea that thoughts become things, that life's like a movie, write your own ending. The implication is that, what, if I think something and I believe it, I'm going to possibly co-create that. And if somebody sits down and they're filling out a job application and they're going, "I'm not going to get this job. Jesus, why am I wasting my time? I'm not going to get this job." You're sending a prayer to the universe saying, "I don't want this job."
Yeah.
You sit down and you go, "This job is for this is if this is it, and this is going to be great for me, and I deserve this, but if I don't get it," the interesting thing, the point that I think is the launch pad for me, is when I go, if I don't get it, well, what is coming that is fabulous? Because to me, no is a gift. No is a gift.
No is
doesn't get what something Rich wants, then what is coming for Rich that the universe doesn't want you to have that, because it'll get in the way of what you really, really deserve.
interesting. Would you identify as a dreamer, and how how has being a dreamer, if you identify that way, affected your life?
I think that that we have an access to our unconscious, that is powerful. I sat down to write the lyrics to Scrooge.
Okay.
Scrooge and Muppet Christmas Carol. And I literally read the script. I knew what the song needed to be about. This is the best example I can give you about the way I work, and it's based on the way I started living when I quit drinking, when I got sober. When I got sober, I found that when I just surrendered to the fact, whatever's coming, lead me where you need me. Here I am. When I didn't try to control things and I got out of the way, things began to really, really come beautifully into my life. When I sat down to write the songs for the song Scrooge, I literally went and I sat down out in a park. And you may have read this story before, but I went out in a park. I took a little recorder and some paper and pencil. I took a Lawrence Block novel, and I said basically to the Big Amigo or the Muse or the whatever that place where the songs come from, I said, you know what the song's supposed to be about? Let me know when you've got an idea. And I started reading the Lawrence Block Bloody Mystery. And about 3 pages into it, I put the book down and I went, well, okay, wait a minute. The scene starts with a door opening and you see Scrooge's feet. You see Michael Caine's feet. He's walking along in the mud, and when he goes by these little characters, they seem to get colder. And I went, click. When a cold wind blows, it chills you to the bone. But there's nothing in nature that freezes your heart like years of being alone. I went, wow, that's, you guys are pretty good. And it poured out of me. It paints you with indifference. The whole song poured out of me.
It's a very strong. Sorry. Yeah, go on.
My theory.
Yeah.
And anybody, you don't have to be a songwriter to relate to this. You're trying to remember somebody's name, and it's just stupid because you've known them your entire life and you can't remember their name. You go, screw it, and you're washing the dishes or washing the car, or you're going to the bathroom, or you're in the middle of the night and you're lying there, and all of a sudden you sit up in bed and you go, Robert Blake, Arthur, right. And it pops into your head. Who did that work? Who found that name for you? That's your creative spirit and that creative part of your unconscious that continues to do the work when you don't struggle with it. If I'm struggling with it, what's the goddamn name? What is it?
Yeah.
I'm not going to find it. But
right.
If I get out of the way and go, let it go, it comes in. I'm a big believer in the power of your unconscious. So life's like a movie. Write your own ending. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
And if you outline, and there's a great writer, a religious writer or a spiritual writer from the 30s, that Emmett Fox was his name. And he talked about Emmett Fox says, you golden key something by thinking about God, thinking about goodness, thinking about spirit in a kind fashion, and let it go. Don't outline. Say, okay, I want to be signed by Warner Brothers Records, and if Warner Brothers Records doesn't sign me, I'm dead. No, go. I want a chance to sing to the world. Throw it out there, see what the universe comes back with. End of rant.
Yeah, no, I like that. I've kind of come into my own place recently where I, for the first time, and it's interesting because it's kind of tied to what I call my like Jim Henson Kermit dream, that I feel like I've asked things for the universe and it's given me it, and I believe that it's in that same place. Yeah. Sometimes I've done a lot of theater, I've done a lot of music and art, and I feel like the only time I've ever had that kind of connection was, it almost feels like it's intention. It's like you put this intention out, and it's almost like the energy of your soul is kind of putting out energy around the world, around the other people. And I've found connections with other people, and I feel like they might have the same thing. And I think there's something I'm sure you've learned this with collaborations and projects, where it's like there's something you're looking for, there's somebody else looking for the same thing, and then you meet. And to me, like that's where I feel like there's magic in the world.
and I think that one of the things that people do that is a mistake is when you have something you want the universe to hear, you scream it. But if you whisper as if you were talking to your daughter and she's almost asleep and you're going, honey, this is what's coming for you. You whisper something really important from the center of your chest, and I believe the world leans in to hear you.
Nice. I want to segue in. The other day we talked briefly after before the internet stopped working. You were talking really fondly of your brother Mentor.
Yeah.
Tell me if you don't mind. I know he was also a songwriter. If you want, if you want to share a story or just talk about him for a minute, just in terms of what effect he had on you and your relationship.
I'll tell you the story of him writing a song that changed his life.
Okay.
My brother's name was Mentor Ralph Williams. His name was Mentor, which means teacher. And he was 6 years younger than me. He was 6'2", I believe. I'm 5'2". We're both, but I was much prettier than he was. Yeah. Actually, we looked a lot alike. And he wanted to do everything I did. If I started skydiving, he wanted to skydive. I rode bikes in the desert. He wanted to ride bikes in that. I wrote songs. He had actually been started writing songs before I did. When he was 16 years old, he was living in bars in northern New Mexico, sleeping in lofts and playing and singing in bars. I was 27 when I started really writing songs and all. But I had a really solid career. I mean, almost immediately, as soon as I started writing songs at A&M Records, they were getting recorded. Nothing on the radio for about 3 or 4 years, but all of a sudden in 1970, things really took off and all. And I had a big career, and he wanted to be a songwriter as well. So he came out to California, and I helped him get a little starter publishing deal at A&M Records.
Oh, nice.
He was going to write songs at A&M Records like his big brother. And he listened to the radio, and he could listen to see what was working and what was being recorded, what people were listening to. And for the 6-month deal in his little office 2 doors down from mine, he cranked out songs and nothing, absolutely nothing. So on a Saturday before the end of his contract, he went in to clean out his office. He went in there. A&M Records is on an old movie, the old Chaplin movie lot. So it's this big empty movie lot. There's nobody there but him and the guard that day, basically. He goes up to his office. He sits in his office and he's going, God, what am I doing wrong? I mean, he's like totally confused. It's pouring rain out. He's got to clean out this office, and he just doesn't know. He's lost and he's confused. He grabs a yellow pad and a pencil and he writes, day after day, I'm more confused.
Ah, there you go.
It's raining out there. So he goes, yet I look for the light in the pouring rain. And it pours out of him. And if this sounds familiar, it should, because it's, give me the beat, boy.
Yeah.
Be my soul. I want to get lost in your rock and roll and drift away. He wrote Drift Away that day, not based on what was happening in the world around him, but he wrote from the center of his chest what was happening in little Mentor Williams' chest. And when he did that, he gave them authenticity, and he was fearless. He showed the world that he was lost, but there was something that would pull him. And you know what? The lesson for all of us, I think, is in that. That would be the story I would always tell Rich about.
That's a great story.
By being himself, he was exactly what the world needed.
That song is also, I mean, that song, it's such a powerful message. It's such a really sweet, positive song.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's get back to you for a second. Do you feel, what are some songs or a song that you had, where you were in a similar moment where you were deeply, it seems like from what I've learned and what I've read, I went through a lot of lyrics, you're writing very personal stuff. What were some of the moments like for you that were like that, where you're just writing from your heart and?
Well, yeah, I think most of the time, I think that, yeah, it's, and I wrote a lot of songs, especially when I was, there was, from the very beginning, I wrote what I jokingly refer to as codependent anthems. I wrote Ouch Mommy songs, Pick Me Up and Love Me, I Need You to Leave Me, I Won't Last a Day Without You is not a healthy thought, So I've done some therapy, but But I think that what happens is when you write from here, for me it's like, and there some of my favorites were not hits. I wrote a song called "A Perfect Love" that
Okay.
Ray Charles recorded, and
Oh, wow.
old enough to know when I've been wrong, and fool enough to think I still might change. Write something like that, and I feel like I'm writing from the very center of my chest and all. I'm going to go back there someday. For Gonzo in the Muppet Movie is right out of my chest. I've never been there, but I know the way. I'm going to go back there someday.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Rich, there's not a word yet. For old friends who just met, that could be us.
Yeah.
Right there. Right?
So can I ask you a question about that? Because that's a question I had written. So, obviously with the Muppet Movie, it's, obviously the Rainbow Connection is kind of known as the big song. But for me, when I look at that movie, the most touching moment is I'm going to go back there someday.
Thank you. Me too.
Tell me more about, and there's another thing, but so tell me more about where that song came from and what it was expressing.
You just went to my favorite song in the movie, flat out. And there was no, first of all, writing with Jim Henson. Jim Henson was the most giving, when we sat down and talked about the story at my house, and with Jerry Jewell, who was writing the script, and myself and Frank Oz and the producer, we had kind of laid out what the songs were going to be about, where were going to go, and all, just the beginnings of a conversation.
Yeah.
I walked Jim to the car and I said, Jim, I want Kenny Asher to do this. I had done Emmett Otter alone for Emmett Otter's Jug Man Christmas. I wanted a really beautiful music for this to go with my words. So I wanted Kenny Asher to be part of it. Kenny Asher's basically music. I write words.
Yes.
So walking him to the car, I said, Jim, we're not going to surprise you with this. This is an important step. This was our first Muppet feature. Well, I will let you know along the way what the songs are about. And he said, you don't have to do that, Paul. I'll hear him in the studio. He was that he was that open to I think he had complete faith in who he chose to work with. He gave them their creative space to do that. So there were all these places where there were going to be songs that had a pretty good idea. But Kenny and I looked at this scene, or read this scene, because this time it hadn't been shot. Read this scene where they break down in the desert. And Gonzo is a landlocked bird. I believe I'm a landlocked bird.
What does that mean exactly?
A landlocked bird,
What does that mean?
Gonzo is a landlocked bird?
Yeah.
I think that we have spirits that soar, that fly. I think that we're stuck in these bodies that walk around down here. But I think that your spirit will fly, your creative spirit will fly, your soul will fly, and someday so will you, and leave all this stuff behind.
Well, thanks for including me in that. That's an honor to hear. Thank you.
What we thought.
Yeah.
We thought, this is a landlocked bird, and he's out there in the desert, and I know what the sky looks like in the desert. And so for Gonzo to be looking at all those stars and to have that as somebody who he's a bird or something, and we just thought he would have a spiritual moment there. So we wrote the song and we played it for Jim, and Jim went like this. Oh, that's a really beautiful, So we figured that was his way of saying, get out, there's no room for that song. So it was, to us, had just been passed. And about 2 days later, he showed up and he said, what if Gonzo at the fair buys a bunch of helium balloons for Camilla?
Yeah.
And he experiences flight, and it doesn't scare him. It's like he's thrilled. He's loving it. He's home. And then so we have something for the audience to see that is very much of this world, that causes him to even think about that. And once he had done that, well, we were in. And thank you.
Interesting.
It's my favorite moment I think in the picture.
And I would say, like, as much as it's focused on Kermit and his story and his songs, I feel like the soul of that movie is on Gonzo.
Yeah.
I feel like, especially in that song.
Yeah. I think that Kermit has this amazing ability as like the stage manager in our town. I mean, he's or Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life. There's kind of a part of him that remains the Well, he's the main character in It's a Wonderful Life. There's a part of him that is this sort of narrator to the story. There's a general calm and a kindness in there and all. And I think that Kermit is the Jimmy Stewart of frogs.
Yeah. I want to shift one to a thing. I had done a little bit of basically a survey of some of your lyrics, and I found this similar idea that I feel like it's like a yin yang balance. Just like there's not a word yet for old friends you just met. I wrote a few lyrics here. One was, I never had a love like this before. I never had it so good. There's a lot of, what I'm picking up in your writing is a lot of past and present at the same time. And I think it's really amazing. Like, I think it's from you and me against memories alone will get us through. Think about the days of me and you and me against the world. There's this like balance of past and present in a lot of your lyrics, which I was just curious, is that more based in the spirituality stuff we talked about before?
It just shows up in our paths were crossed and parted. This love affair was started long, long ago from Phantom to Paradise. Our love is an old love, baby. It's older than all our years. I have seen in strange young eyes familiar tears. I think there's a lot of past life and so you're very observant. It's a recurring theme. I love ageless and evergreen. I mean, it's just it does show up a lot. I kind of cling to the past in a hopefully a really healthy way. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about. I mean, I'm always excited about what I'm working on now, the next project rather. And the fact that it's really interesting. I think that it's a way that I can incorporate the sentimentality of the great affection for certain moments or the longing for it in a way that other people relate to. Because when you start talking about, was there a love there in your past? Was there somebody back there that it didn't work out and you just thought it was going to kill you at the time, but now you're beginning to see that it was that there was a lot there, but part of that is still with you. That's stuff in our chest. That's part of the human experience and all that. And if I tap into something that is powerful in my own being, as far as just a part of who I am, every my wife has a quote that I think is brilliant. She used one time, and I've always remembered it. She said, "Kisses are a better fate than wisdom." And so kisses are a better fate
than wisdom.
The wise thing to do would be to stand, whatever, but we dive in and we fall in love, and it's the wrong person at the wrong time or whatever, but it's the exactly right person at that moment, and blah, 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 and it becomes a song.
Let me ask you a question about, have you ever dug into any past life work? Have you ever had like someone read your past lives of you? And if not, I was curious, if you feel like you believe in past lives, what do you think your past life may have been?
I was probably a gladiator, and I don't know. I totally believe, absolutely believe in past lives. I've had a couple of really strange experiences where I was dreaming, and I stood up and I had a dream where I was looking out with the city, but what I was seeing was a bunch of Viking boats, and I was strapping on furs as my protection, and I had the feeling that what I was putting on to protect myself, the furs, was going to drown me.
Wow.
My girlfriend woke up and she saw me standing there, and I was naked, just standing there. And she said, "I don't know why, but you look like a Viking." And I went, "Wow," because I was dreaming that I was a Viking about to die.
Do you think that past lives might play out in dreams? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
I think that there are stranger things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than
Okay.
Yeah, I think that we carry relationships from one life into the next. I feel it. I think that's where a phrase like "there's not a word yet for old friends just met." I think the old friends who just met in this lifetime. And yet I don't want to identify it with that baggage for somebody who can just experience it on a different level.
I got you.
Of like, wow, I just met somebody and we were instant buddies.
Yeah. And it's funny because I would say, like, this Muppet Zoom event on Saturday has kind of gotten a little bigger, and I've talked to so many people, and this idea keeps coming up, and I feel like there's a certain I have a bit of I was born on Jim Henson's birthday. I have my own narrative around Jim Henson, but I've not really stayed current with the current fandom. And everybody was so welcoming to me that it was everyone I talked to welcomed me as an old friend, which I was really honored and shocked by, because I'm not really in that scene, unfortunately. I have not kept up with I've not really kept up with the fan base so much.
Yeah.
I just a reference real quick. So I had a past life reading once, and they told me that I apparently was in charge of a village, and my village essentially killed me and left me for dead outside the village. And I was like, yep, that makes sense. That feels right.
Rotten bastards! How dare they?
Yeah. I want to get more.
It's life, and I'm going to kick your ass.
I want to get back into some of your collaborations. I know you speak a lot about Kenny Asher, about Roger Nichols. Are you comfortable? Can you talk about either one of them, or maybe share a story around working with those folks?
It was Roger Nichols' birthday. If you look at my Instagram account, you'll see that I wrote about Roger.
Yeah, I read that post. I thought it was really sweet.
Yeah. This is Roger Nichols and Paul Williams in 1970, whatever. And it's like, what I wrote was, "Happy birthday, Roger Nichols." This photo was taken sometime in the very early 70s when Roger and I were writing together every day at A&M Records. I'm not sure there would be a Paul Williams songwriter without Roger Nichols. He was my music school. He wrote the gorgeous melodies that unlocked the lyrics that became "We've Only Just Begun," "Rainy Days and Mondays," "Out in the Country" for Three Dog Night we wrote together.
Yeah.
We wrote hundreds of songs that wound up on albums that were never played on the radio. I mean, we were blue collar songwriters, and I said, "Thank you, Roger, for the gift of your music, wisdom, and friendship. Sending love to you and your ladies." He has beautiful twin daughters and all. So, Roger, I showed up, and they were looking at A&M. They were looking for a lyricist for Roger Nichols, and it was from the very beginning. I believe that the words are in the music.
Okay.
When I'm writing with somebody else, because their music affects me and it unlocks certain emotions, and I verbalize them. Kenny Asher and I write a little differently. We kind of write at the same time.
Okay.
He and I were in, Kenny Asher and I started writing, pretty good story about Kenny and I. Kenny was my piano player that I just started working with. We went to England to do a concert, a show called In Concert. And there were no permits for my band members. Something got screwed up, so he couldn't play. So Kenny's sitting around all day and is not able to go and work with me on this special. And we started talking about the songs we love, and we both love Randy Newman.
Yeah.
And we wrote he just started playing that, and we wrote. We wrote a little song together called "Nilsson Sings Newman," which is like a minute long. "Do you love me, babe? Do you love me not? Love me not? Let's decide in the morning, not now. Boo, boo. Do you love me, babe? Do you love me not? Let's decide in the morning, not now. Oh, you don't like Schumann or Randy Newman. Nilsson ain't your cup of tea. You think Van Heusen is a shirt worth choosing, and you're still undecided about me. Bo, bo, do you love me, babe? Do you love me? Now, let's decide in the morning, not now." We laughed, and Kenny said, if you did that on the album, at the start of an album, it would be interesting to come out of that into something like, and he went, "Bum, bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum." And he looked at me, and I went, "You and me against the world." And he played a chord. "Sometimes it feels like you and me." And that was the beginning of our writing together. And it's always been really organic like that and all. Right now I'm writing with a guy a lot named Gustavo Santaolalla.
Okay.
And loving Gustavo's writing and working with him. It's the same, that same solid connection where I just want to go back again and again and again and work with him.
Are you able? I know I did some research and read it, and there was something you had said that you always think in music. Are you able to hear the music and then hear the lyrics from the music, and are you able to connect? How does that work?
you know what I hear? I hear words that fit the emotion that I feel in the music.
Okay.
You know, you know. I spent the morning I was talking with Rich. You know, it could.
You should write that song.
That's the moaning bitch. We were lost in thought, and at that time we caught a friendship that was new and exciting, something inviting. I mean, blah blah blah. It's there, you know. And the great gift is that I'm able to turn it into a way to feed my kids and
Yeah.
have a life. And at this point in my life, also work to see to it that songwriters and composers and music publishers are properly compensated for their.
Let me just segue into two areas. One thing I want to get into is I know you had a recent collaboration, I guess 4 years ago, with Daft Punk, which that song is amazing. I can't tell you, it's so wonderfully out there in the best way, and I assume when I listened to it that the lyrics were from a different song, but did you write that? You wrote those lyrics for that song, correct?
Well, they gave me two melodies. I wrote the lyrics to Touch, and I wrote the lyrics to Beyond.
Okay, I didn't realize there was more. Okay.
Yeah, and it was very simple, kind of just like a piano of the melody. And it's interesting, you know. Pharrell talks about that song, and he said, I mean, the best compliment I've ever had for one of my songs. Pharrell said that he said, this is a song that will not only, he said, will change your life. He said he couldn't believe it. What happened was, and it's interesting, it goes back to something you talked about earlier, or asked about. When on my first meeting with the Daft Punk, they handed me a book and they said, we don't know why this is important to the album we're doing, but and they handed me a book about past lives, people that had died and come back to life.
Interesting.
And so they gave me the music, and I said, I know that book. I've read it years ago, and so that was kind of just boom. That sparked a kind of a general. And what was great about the collaboration is that we never identified who the me was, who the I was in the song.
Okay.
Touch, I remember Touch. Pictures came with Touch, a painter in my, and what I tried to do, or what I did, and then try to explain it later, because I'm not trying to do that.
Yeah.
I'm just writing what I feel. I wrote it almost almost childlike. Pictures came with Touch. You know, tell me what you see. We don't identify whether that it's somebody who died and has come back to life. Is it somebody who's traveling, you know, across space, so they've been put to sleep and now they've been awakened? Is it somebody who has been created, you know, put into an artificial intelligence, but with the human elements, and they remember touch, you know, but now they're robots, you know. So we never identify them, you know.
And I read they were big fans of Phantom of the Paradise, correct? That's kind of how they found you.
They saw 20 times together in Paris. And then the other song, Beyond Dreams, is kind of their, I hope, their philosophy. I mean, I think the most important line in Beyond is, there's no such thing as competition. There's no such thing as competition, you know. But listen to the words to Beyond again.
Okay.
Touch got a lot of attention because I sang it, and which is, you know, I hadn't sung in a long time. But Beyond has, I think, is one of my favorite lyrics ever. Dream beyond dream.
I know you've made a lot of albums. I know you've written a lot. Is there a different kind of process or a different feeling around singing versus writing, and then how does that kind of work? You know, I'm just curious about how, because I feel like you've played a lot of different roles. You've played songwriter, but you've also sang a lot. And I love your voice. One of my favorite albums is this one. And talking about what you were talking about before, whenever this album has gotten me through 3 really horrible breakups, and I just listened to it on repeat for like a week. And I feel like there's I think you were talking before where like about love and jumping in, and I think this, whatever is in this album, has healed me in a lot of ways for horrible relationships. I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult, but it's meant to be a
I got
compliment.
it. That's a massive compliment. That's, and the gentleman that produced that, we just lost the gentleman that produced that. Michael James Jackson
Okay.
produced that. He produced, oddly enough, some of the Kiss's biggest records as
Huh.
well. But what he did when he took me in the studio, I'd made one other album. Actually, I'd made two albums. I made an album with a small group that included my brother called Holy Mackerel.
Okay.
I made an album called Someday Man. It was basically Roger Nichols' album. I sang it, but it's all the songs I wrote with Roger, including Someday Man, which the Monkees recorded.
Is Simple Man
But
on that album?
Simple Man is on the one you just held up.
Okay, and that's a what's his name?
Graham Nash.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. That's the only song on. It's at any rate. What Michael did on the album that I think was so important is he didn't give me everything I thought I needed, which was a lot of strings and a lot of like, let's put my voice way back, whatever. He said, no, let's put it out front, strip everything away, you and the emotion of the song, and let the people hear you. Have faith in me, he said, and have faith in yourself.
Wow.
And I didn't love the way I sang it all. I sounded it all then. I love the way it felt to sing it, honestly. But when I listened back to the records, I sound, after, I just had my 82nd birthday, and so up till the time I was 49, I smoked, I drank and drugged to excess. Like the 80s were gone for me. That was the decade. Well, you're an alcoholic when you misplace a decade. That was what I wound up
T-shirt.
With. I wound up with a voice at this point in my life that I actually would like to sing with, and at this point my hearing is so finding the note is kind of a challenge, so I'm not singing much.
I want to dig. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I want to dig back into the Muppets since this is an official Muppet event. We talked about Jim, but I kind of want to know your relationship with Dave Goelz, because it seems like, based on talking to you about writing the songs for Gonzo, it seems like maybe you and him had a special relationship as well, I'm assuming.
I think that the lyrics of that line, "There's not a word yet for old friends you just met," is a perfect description of me and of Dave and I and Gonzo and as well. If Dave is there with Gonzo, and there are three of us in the conversation. Gonzo, there's especially with like Jim and Kermit, Frank and Piggy and myself, there'd be five of us in the conversation.
Yeah.
Piggy would say things to me that Jim wouldn't, or that Frank Oz would probably never say. Certainly Jim wouldn't, whatever. And Kermit would be shocked at what Piggy said. But yeah, Dave, there is such a depth of soul there, and we always just clicked. I think that he has I think he's a massive, massive talent. I think he's the wisdom is intense and loving.
Yeah.
There's a kindness about Dave Goelz that does not lose the he has the kindness, but he has not lost the edge. And that's the brilliance of I love people like that. When I was a kid, I used to watch Oscar Levant. Most of you people that pay attention to you may not know who Oscar Levant is. Oscar Levant was a great piano player who was a crazy addict, who was cynical and hilarious.
Yeah.
And, he wanted to be a composer and a classic pianist. He believed that there was one genius per generation, and it was George Gershwin.
Okay.
He played Gershwin's music, but he wrote one wonderful song called "Blame It on My Youth." But
okay.
Investigate
Definitely.
Oscar Levant. You will find a really interesting, because you are, in fact, this is Annals, this is archive, this is ancient history. You're going to love Oscar Levant.
Nice. I want to just get back a little bit. I feel like Frank Oz, to me, is one of the funniest human beings and the kindest. I met him once, and I can't tell you how generous he was to me. Did you get to work with Frank? Tell me more about like Frank, because I feel like because of him not being seen, him not being as public as Jim, I feel like he doesn't get the same, he doesn't really, he's not as well known as Jim. But what was it about Frank that you liked, or any stories, anything working with him that was interesting?
I think that the essence of the friendship of Jim and Frank is the seed money to all the joy, the friendship, the fun, the wisdom, the brilliant communication style of the Muppets, I think begins with Frank and Jim.
Yeah.
I wasn't around then. I was watching the Muppets on Ed Sullivan when it was Slinkies and whatever, and I was a huge fan of Sesame Street.
Yeah.
I told you, I think that my band and I would watch Sesame Street on the road. It was like they were helping to turn us into adults. But Frank, Frank has a heart and a kindness that is massive. The first thing I did when the musical that I just wrote during the pandemic, I sent to him. We got his feedback immediately. I said I would love it if you would direct it. He's got like 4 projects in a row that he's producing and directing, whatever. So but I got his feedback immediately, and if there are things that he's done that just he directed a Broadway show called In and of Itself.
I was just going to ask you about that. Tell me about. I assumed you would have enjoyed. Tell me about your experience with that show.
Did you see it?
I saw the doc. I didn't see the show. I saw the documentary, which blew me away.
Yeah,
I didn't understand it. I still don't understand it, but I think it was amazing.
Yeah, it's just stunning.
Yeah.
And the thing is that the lesson that I got out of it, and it's and it's like going down a rabbit hole that remains fascinating at every turn.
Yeah.
And that's the combination of the brilliant talent on screen but it's also that direction of the Frank brought to the entire experience. And I think what I got out of it is be careful about your labels. If you like, I'm a songwriter, I am a songwriter, but I'm also an actor, and I'm also a recovering alcoholic. And I would probably put that in the opposite order. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I'm a retired chemist. I'm I think at this point, I think a student of lifestyle and of life energies, and we've changed locations because I wanted a little more light on your face. So I just imagined the location. Look how powerful I am. What I was saying that I think is important is that I think you can do, I know you can do this. And I love the level of conversation, totally comfortable, doesn't feel packaged at all. There's nothing slick about either of us. So it's real,
You're a little prettier still. You're
Pardon?
still a little prettier.
Well, I at any rate, I would love to see you do more of this. And if you want to, assume you're going to get the chance to. This is, I think we're pretty much getting close to an end right now. But it's a beginning. And let's let this grow if it's going to.
I really hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I enjoyed being in that conversation. Next week we have a really exciting interview with a local Philadelphian. I do reside in West Philadelphia. Gabriel Nathan drives an old school 60s Herbie bug, and does a really cool, really amazing suicide prevention program. And his story is fucking amazing. His story starts off when he was 5 years old, watching Herbie the Love Bug, and how that movie set his life on a dream that he still pursues to this day, close to 30 years or 35 years. I forget how old exactly Gabe is, but it was a pleasure to meet him and to talk with him. So that is coming up next. Please check our website. We have a bunch of content on there. We got our video archive. We have a deep dive where there's about 30 different topics, different people, and you could essentially has a bunch of resources that you can kind of on your own learn about the person. There's a bunch of articles. Usually if it's a musician, there's a music playlist or in a video playlist, and you just kind of dig around and learn based on your own interests within a category. We have a YouTube page. We have our Instagram, which is our, a great page. So please, all our pages are Vintage Annals Archive. Again, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Please follow everything and check out the website. I'm sure you'll love it. We also have a very large photo archive of found and family photos through the last 50 years. So again, thank you for showing up. www.vintageannalsarchive.com. I will see you next week for Gabe's awesome, really great story.